What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. So I was going down the rabbit hole of characters. I started out with trying to find some weird and wacky story involving Thor, and then I found a story where he died. And that story was where he died alongside everybody else. The problem is that his death, along with the deaths of all the other superheroes, is referenced but not actually seen. And I was going through and trying to find the point where you actually saw it happen, which of course I didn't find. But I basically ran on this story, King Hyperion, that comes from the Exiles. Now, we've only ever really talked about the Exiles previously, kind of in passing, but never really talked about them in any measure of depth. The Exiles were actually a team, or actually a comic that was created by Marvel, or created by Judd Winnick on behalf of Marvel, and the goal was to basically take the concept of a what-if story, which is to say, what if things happened differently? Like, what if Spider-Man kept the Venom symbiote instead of getting rid of it, and then basically turn that into an ongoing series. The overall gist of the Exiles is that they are basically a team of individuals who serve the purpose of traveling around the multiverse and fixing things. But the whole role portrayed by the Exiles eventually went away. This was basically a team where the story lasted for about 108 issues, I think it was, at least in the first volume. Eventually, Chris Claremont came on board with issue number 90, lasted 18 issues, it got canceled. Marvel tried to bring it back a couple more times, but it never really lasted anything more than 18 issues. The second run, called New Exiles, lasted 18 issues. The third attempt to launch it lasted 6, and then Marvel just took the concept of exploring the multiverse and just threw it into different stories. All that was in the midst of the huge reshuffling going on in Marvel in the mid-2000s. But the idea is that the Exiles serve at the behest of a guy called Time Broker. And Time Broker basically has this artifact called the Talus. And the Talus basically tells the Exiles what they're supposed to be doing. The idea here is that in addition to the Exiles, there was a team called Weapon X. This name was simply given to this other version of the Exiles because the Weapon X title is so popular among both comic readers and non-comic readers. But the idea is that where the Exiles are basically good guys trying to solve problems, Weapon X is really more of like a Black Ops team. They're basically assigned to go in and fix multiversal problems by going through and killing people. In this instance, as it stands right now, what this does is it actually picks up with similar characters, albeit playing different roles. Of course, we have Colossus, we have Vision, but one of the characters, or I guess a couple of the characters who are a little more unique here than others, are Carol Danvers and Spider-Man. Carol Danvers is a lot more ruthless here. She's a lot more cruel, she's a lot more hardcore. In the main Marvel comics, Carol Danvers was really more of a character where she was just trying to get people to care about her. She was just like, hey, look, I'm a superhero too, and nobody ever really seemed to care that much. But with Peter Parker, this is interesting, and this is when we start to get into the what if concept. In this instance, it's what if Peter Parker had been bonded to the Carnage symbiote. And so in this story, Peter Parker is basically Cletus Cassidy. He's insane. But the overall goal is the idea that they are basically here to kill Bruce Banner. And that's kind of the ruthless nature of it, is because there's not some great big huge epic fight between Bruce Banner, Hulk, and the Weapon X team. Instead, he just dies. Carol Danvers just kills him right off the bat. And that's really it. Now, of course, what this does is it also leads to the Weapon X team basically being teleported to the new universe. And for the most part, it was this idea that like the Exiles, they were people who were brought together from different universes. But they were basically told, if you fix enough of these problems, you'll be allowed to go home. They were just kind of shanghaied into it. But what this also does is it brings back into play the character of Hyperion. Because of the fact that Hyperion was introduced as Marvel's version of Superman, his character kind of waxed and waned over the years. But the idea of the Exiles was to test the waters. It was basically a newer iteration of the anthology comics, where you would have 5 different stories in a singular comic. This served the same purpose. Instead of being a whole bunch of stories in one comic, it would be one story, but it would bring in a character that fans liked at one point, didn't really seem to like anymore, and Marvel would basically reintroduce them and say, hey, would you be interested in seeing this character more often? But in this new universe where they get teleported to, essentially what had happened is Xavier's dream of a peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants completely and totally failed. Basically, humans ended up launching an attack simultaneously against the X-Men under Charles Xavier and all the superheroes across Earth. The result is that all but 10 mutants are basically eradicated, and the Earth superheroes, the Avengers, are dead. That all happens off panel. We never actually see that take place. But what had happened is Magneto had grabbed a handful of mutants, brought them aboard Asteroid M, basically his base of operations that's literally an asteroid asteroid orbiting Earth, and then said, okay, fine, if humanity wants to play this game, then we'll annihilate them all. Now, of course, the role of Weapon X being here is to simply eliminate the last 10 mutants, but one of them is basically revealed to be Kitty Pryde, who was essentially spying on Hyperion and Carol Danvers, touching naughty bits is really what was going on with them. But remember, for Kitty Pryde, hiding out and basically staying hidden from the whole series of events basically means that she doesn't know the state of a lot of the mutants who are out there. And so when she sees Colossus, her initial thought is that this is the Colossus that I know. So now, of course, Peter immediately just clears that out and says, no, I'm not the Colossus that you know. But it begins the process of setting the stage for the destruction of all of humanity. Because the goal of Magneto is to basically grab Asteroid M, to simply send Asteroid M crashing into Earth, and then to take their ship and just sail off to another planet and live on that one. But we also end up finding out the last remaining mutants are aboard Asteroid M. So basically Iceman, Forge, Quicksilver, Mystique, different things like that. And so what ends up happening here is that initially there's some dissent in the sense that Hyperion basically says, hey, look, yeah, we've been sent here to kill these 10 mutants, but like Time Broker won't know what's going on until the 10 mutants are dead, and then we'll just be sent to another universe. So why kill them? Why not just like stay here and conquer this world? It turns into his attempt to conquer Earth. Now, what this does is it creates a rift among the team. Vision is the first one to go because Vision operates strictly according to logic. And his argument is, we were sent here for a mission, we should complete that mission, then we'll continue on, and eventually we'll get our just rewards once this is all said and done. But in the face of that, the other superheroes basically say, yeah, Peter Parker is expected to serve 67 consecutive life sentences for the people that he killed. Why not just live on another Earth that they can basically control? This leads directly into humanity learning Magneto sending an asteroid into Earth, he's basically going to obliterate it all. But this is when we see like the full power, really like a strong indication of the power that Hyperion has. He's not human. He's not a normal human being. He's an alien, which means he functions completely separate from anybody else out there. And so where normal superheroes, or I guess the government's used to dealing with like Incredible Hulk, used to dealing with Thor, those kind of guys, they're not used to dealing with Hyperion. He shows up and obliterates those Sentinels, no muss, no fuss. There's no questions asked here. But also notice how cruel and how disconnected he is. Now, he'll get a lot worse by the time this story comes to an end, but at the moment, he has no real regard for Carol Danvers. I mean, she's trying to deal with these Sentinels as best she can, and his idea is we'll basically destroy the central processor for the Sentinels. They'll simply all just shut down. The ones who are attacking you will be destroyed, but maybe you'll die in the process, maybe you'll live, I don't know. It's not my concern, and that's not my problem. Now, of course, what we also end up learning is that some of the other mutants who are basically not there among Magneto have taken up refuge alongside Storm, and is basically Storm's own personal city. And the idea is that the city is basically protected by the various electrical storms, different things like that she conjures and keeps running 24 hours a day. Now, when it comes to Storm's powers, we've seen these fluctuate over the years, and so there's a little bit of stretching with regards to credulity in this story, because the idea is that we're basically being asked to believe that Storm can keep these powers going 24 hours a day. But we know that just like anybody else that has to basically channel their energies to use their powers, eventually she'll wear down and eventually she'll get tired and just sort of pass out. But the other thing is that this has happened almost immediately. The formation of this city is basically in response to the conflict that's been going on between humans and mutants for quite some time, but it's only really reached this fever pitch, presumably within the last like week or so. So it's not like she's been doing this nonstop for like months and months and months and months, but there is going to come a point when her power is going to begin to run down. And so in order to just simply avoid having to answer that question in the first place, Judd Winnick and company actually jump into this pretty intelligently, where they basically take what would normally be this tail end of her powers and snip it off and bring this whole thing coming to bear. And so of course, Hyperion pops up having killed the president of the United States, and this meets with the arrival of Magneto and company. Now, of course, Magneto and these guys are here just because of the fact that they view that there are those who fought alongside him and there are those who fought against him. Those who chose to side against him will basically exist as servants. And so the idea here is that he comes face to face with Hyperion himself. But what this does is it brings into sharp relief the idea that Hyperion begins falling down the path to becoming a bad guy. Now, what this also does is it brings in a character named Vanisher. Now, the Vanisher was never really an important character in the realm of Marvel. He was one of those attempts by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby back in the 1960s when they first started writing the X-Men. He was an attempt by them to basically introduce these villains who were really more like comedic, or where they were softer villains, as opposed to like the hardcore villains that we would see and like the Claremont era going forward from the 70s all the way up to the modern day in Marvel. But what ended up happening with Vanisher is he was basically a guy who could teleport himself around. His powers were expanded over the years and he could teleport other people, but originally he could only teleport himself. And the idea was that he was just committing crimes, going into banks, stealing money, and that was really about it. In this instance, his character graduated to a higher level of prominence, who eventually became a part of a group called Factor 3 under Roy Thomas. Factor 3 was one of these old school X-Men teams that existed to basically try to control the world. He had like Mastermind and a handful of others, you know, Blob and different things like that. Of course, this also brings Hyperion into direct conflict with Magneto, where he basically orders Magneto to stop the asteroid. Now, of course, Magneto says no, and in response, Hyperion destroys Mystique. Not only that, he grabs Magneto, flies him into space, and kills him. And so again, this is ruthless. This is pretty brutal. I mean, he's just like tearing these guys limb from limb. The other half of this is that Storm and Gambit are basically two characters who are missing their other halves, in the sense that in Gambit's home reality, Storm had died. In this universe, Gambit had died. And so it's basically a chance for these characters to just kind of reconcile and live their lives together. The issue is that it's extremely short-lived, because with this asteroid coming, you know, flying towards Earth, what ends up happening is Hyperion and Rogue basically work together. Now, of course, this involves Rogue touching Hyperion, which of course confirms the fact that she can absorb a portion of his power just like anybody else. And the two of them essentially take off into space in an effort to try to destroy this asteroid. Now, again, this is where Hyperion gets hardcore, because in attempting to destroy this asteroid, it of course starts breaking into pieces. Well, in response to this, he simply says, this asteroid can't be stopped. It's just way too big. And so he allows Rogue to be totally obliterated in the asteroid's path. The asteroid crash lands onto Earth, and it's an extinction level event. Every single human being on Earth gets completely eradicated. At this point, it's like, okay, well then let's just move on. The problem with this is that like Colossus has grown close to this universe's version of Kitty Pryde. And so in response to this, Hyperion shows up and kills them both. Somebody just eradicates the both of them. At that point, it's turning its sights onto everybody else. And so this turns into a veritable bloodbath. Forge is killed. Quicksilver is killed. All these members are just totally eradicated. The only ones left are those who are faithful to Hyperion. Whether they're faithful through fear or whether they're faithful through the fact that they actually believe what it is that he's doing is irrelevant. At the end of the day, they side with him. And so of course this leads to, I guess, Spider Carnage basically going through, killing Vanisher. It leads to Gambit and Storm trying to take off as best they can, but it also brings us a couple of versions of other characters. Another version of the Incredible Hulk and a version of Firestar. Firestar not really being important here, but the idea is that with all these individuals having been killed, all that's really left is just Hyperion's team. The Incredible Hulk, Firestar, Carol Danvers, and Spider Carnage. And their idea is simply just move into another universe, to go to another reality, to simply say, if this is how things are going to be, then all we have to do is wait until we find a world worth conquering. And when we do, we'll just take it over. And so what this does is this segues into the next story, A Blink in Time, where Hyperion moves to a new reality and then actually kills all that universe's superheroes. It's crazy. There's one point where he actually kills Galactus, which is completely bonkers. One of the craziest things I've ever seen. But anyway, guys, I thought it'd be kind of a cool story to cover here. I thought it'd be pretty interesting. Figured you guys might dig it. If you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.